Hello everyone, my name is Glenna Nickel.
I'm Mario Hernandez.
I'm Samantha Olivares.
And I'm Mariah Noyola, and we will be discussing the evaluation of crisis communications. So on the agenda, we will be discussing model crisis communication, crisis response strategies, crisis management in hindsight, and audience evaluation.
So to start off, crisis communication essentially is when a crisis occurs, the audience has to perceive this information from a company to kind of get a gist of what they're saying. So our entire PowerPoint basically is about how a company would speak to these consumers, in what ways, and also the different types of things behind that to appeal to these people.
So the model of crisis communications deals with ethics and how it must be taken into account when dealing with a crisis situation. This is shown in the TTR test, which deals with what companies need to say, how exactly they should say it, and when the right time it is to say it. Ethics is an important aspect of crisis communication in order for it to be effective, and it must be implemented in a business's model of crisis communication to avoid the business being reprimanded. So ethics has been defined as what is right from wrong, just or unjust. There are a number of theories and strategies that establish ethical guidelines of what to say in a crisis situation, how to say it, and when it needs to be said, and how it should be said. A two-symmetrical model focuses on the relationship between an organization and the public. This model includes telling the truth and understanding the employee and neighbor viewpoints. So when delivering the message, a crisis has been noted to be considered a significant threat, unpredictability, and urgency, and it may also occur in different forms from natural disasters to workplace violence. Crisis communication is what a firm must say and do after the event of a crisis to reduce any and all negative effects that can occur. The theory of image restoration discourse focuses on message options and what a firm can say during a time of emergency. The TTR test is used to prevent a firm from damaging their reputation, which includes what a firm says, how they say it, and when they say it. This can be divided into three ways: pre-crisis, crisis event, and post-crisis. The corresponding stages in the process help create a development by knowing what to say and what actions would need to be done in each stage. So fitting a crisis message should be first to your primary audience, followed by your secondary audience. That leads to the when aspect of the strategy, followed by the what portion of crisis communication. Studies have found that a fast, honest, and complete response could help pick up an organization's reputation.
And now we lead into crisis response strategies. Under crisis response strategies, I will be discussing attribution theory, relationship quality outcomes, crisis response strategies. So first, we will be talking about attribution theory. When faced with a crisis, an individual finds ways to deal with the successful or unsuccessful events. This theory allows us to understand and anticipate how people cope with events based on the amount of responsibility people attribute to the individual or group responsible. Within this theory, there is a measure of attribution crisis response strategies that are implemented in order to help an organization say when a crisis hits. First, you must look, in order for a strategy to be successful, you must look for three components. The first component, a successful response should be informative and help stakeholders be aware of what they need to do in order to protect themselves physically during a crisis. Second, each response should provide a detailed explanation of what happened to cause the crisis, as well as the events leading up to the crisis. Lastly, After the stakeholders have been informed of the crisis within the timely manner and have been informed on how to protect themselves, that is when the organization can begin to utilize responses in order to maintain good standing relationships with their stakeholders. And next, we move on to relationship quality outcomes. One of the most important factors when it comes to crisis management is building and maintaining quality pre-crisis relationships. There are many advantages that come with maintaining quality relationships, such as having positive relationships with the public, which will help diminish the effects of a crisis, thus leading to more support for the organization. For relationship quality outcomes, there are 4 dimensions that indicate a successful relationship. Those 4 dimensions are control mutuality, satisfaction, trust, and commitment. Now, in order for these dimensions to apply to a relationship, satisfaction must happen first, thus leading to the other dimensions. And now we move on to crisis response strategies. A study was taking place in order to find out how effective the crisis response strategies are. The study consisted of 352 students that were enrolled in various mass communication courses in 2 large universities in southeastern United States. The study investigated how each strategy affected not only the organization's responsibilities, but also the relationship quality outcomes. The 4 crisis response strategies are scapegoating, justification, apology, and reminding. So first we'll be talking about scapegoating. The example of scapegoating that was conducted in the study was a university blaming their lack of funding as a reason to reduce classes. Similarly, when an organization uses scapegoating, they are using a person or people as a fall guy for the organization's wrongdoings. Next, we'll be talking about justification. An example of justification was the university stating they are within their rights to reduce the classes offered because of the economy. The use of justification is found to be a crisis response manipulation for the simple fact that most organizations in a crisis may use a reason to refute or explain the thing they are being charged with or accused of. In the example, the university stated every possible option was recognized, but unfortunately, in order to prevent a rise in tuition, class cuts must take place. And next we'll be talking about apology. And next we have apology. In this case, the university, in order to show that they did feel bad for making the class cuts, they did apologizing, acknowledging on how it affected the students negatively. And lastly, we have reminding. In this example, reminding was demonstrated, was shown as the university reminding the students how they were always on the student's side. For example, stating that the president was keeping the tuition affordable. Reminding is useful as a crisis response manipulation because the organization can use this strategy to remind people that the organization was once on the good side. At the end of the study, the theory was different than they would have expected. They found a positive relationship between crisis responsibility and perception toward the organization. In short, the article showed that the more blame the public placed on the organization, the more positive the relationship of the members of the public perceived. And now, Glenna will be talking about crisis management in hindsight.
For crisis management in hindsight, first we're going to talk about the 3 C's. The 3 C's are communication, coordination, and control. Communication creates a way to share thoughts and ideas around individuals and groups. Coordination depends on the effective communication, and control keeps your actions focused towards a common goal. Something that doesn't hold the 3 C's together is cognition. Cognition provides the initial content and activating link to the subsequent process: communication, coordination, and control. So without cognition, none of the 3 C's can be enacted. Only using the common C's of emergency management create interdependency within the management, not allowing them to seek outside sources or ideas for creative ideas. Without cognition, it is impossible to organize the other steps of the emergency action plan. In emergency management, cognition checks for malfunctions and is performed by using prior knowledge to solve changing situations. So cognition is basically the tying together of all of the 3 C's. Without cognition, we wouldn't be able to perform communication, and without communication, we wouldn't be able to perform coordination. Without coordination, we would not be able to perform control. Now I'll be handing it over to Mario for audience evaluation.
So, audience evaluation is the practice of analyzing and assessing what various target customers saw or heard about what a company is saying to them. To make that easier to understand, for example, it's whenever an accident happens, let's say that there's an oil spill in the Gulf, and the customer base is waiting for an answer from that company. So the company gets a press release ready, they issue it to the customers, and the evaluation of that response to the customers is what they're trying to determine. And that's what audience evaluation is. So when someone is speaking, there's 3 main factors that they refer to. And what that is exactly is physical appearance, speech, and ethnicity. So with physical appearance, there are different examples. And with speech, the determining factors on that are, let's say that the way a person talks, how fast they're talking or how slow they're talking. And with ethnicity, it's just their ethnicity, whether they be Indian, African American, Native American, and so on and so forth. So during this, there was an initial experiment that was conducted with 250 college students based on 2 main hypotheses. And what those were is that the first one was that strong ethnic background people would not listen to someone of a different ethnic background. And the second hypothesis was that the same people with strong ethnic backgrounds would not accept what they had heard as fact from these people giving them the information from the company. So like I said before, there were 250 college students during this initial experiment, and they used 5 different versions of a crisis. And it was centered in Mexico, the United States, and Japan. So at the end of this experiment, it concluded that the first hypothesis wasn't actually correct 100%. So while people with strong ethnic backgrounds would not listen to someone of a different background, some did and some didn't. So it can't 100% be confirmed. The second, on the other hand, was confirmed to be 100% accurate. People with the same strong ethnic background would not accept what a person of a different background would say as fact. So let's just say that there's a crisis in the African American part of town. Someone who's a white male says to them the crisis and puts it down to them, and they just don't accept it as fact, whereas if for an African American, they would accept it. So the end results were that the first one was concluded as false, and the second was true. So, in conclusion, crisis communication is an effective tool in successful crisis management. So, together and combined, we have effectively investigated and researched the different methods that make crisis communication cohesive, and using ethics is the first part within crisis communication. The organization must be able to maintain the reputation during a time of crisis. And altogether, crisis communication, I don't know, do without crisis communication in the business world. Is Mario Hernandez,
Mariah Noyola,
Glenna Nickel.
And Samantha Olivares. And we would also like to thank you for taking the time